Open any 19th century history textbook right now. Go ahead. Pull one off the shelf, search online, visit a museum, look at the battle paintings, the engravings of military campaigns, the photographs of victorious armies. You'll see hundreds of war scenes, thousands of soldiers in formation, cavalry charges, artillery barrages, generals on horseback, victory celebrations. Now find one amputee, one soldier on crutches, one man with an empty sleeve, one veteran in a wheelchair. You can't. They're not there, as if millions of maimed soldiers simply evaporated the moment battles ended. Stop. Think about what this means. The Crimean War alone, 300,000 wounded Russians returned home. The American Civil War, over 1 million amputations performed by military surgeons, documented, recorded in medical logs, verified by hospital records that still exist today. 1 million amputations in 4 years. That's 685 men losing limbs every single day for 1,460 consecutive days. The Franco-Prussian War added hundreds of thousands more maimed soldiers on both sides. The wars of Italian unification, the British colonial campaigns in Afghanistan and Sudan, the Austro-Prussian conflicts, each created tens of thousands of disabled veterans. By 1900, Europe and America counted over 1.5 million documented war amputees. This isn't dozens of unfortunate casualties. This is an army of cripples larger than the entire military forces of most nations, a population equivalent to major cities like Philadelphia or Vienna. Where did they go? Did they all heal miraculously? Did they vanish into thin air? Did they hide in their homes and never emerge? How does an entire invisible army disappear from every painting, every photograph, every memoir, every historical record? Do you seriously believe this was coincidence? Someone wanted them gone, not physically eliminated. That would leave evidence, create scandal, spark outrage. Number, something far more elegant, far more systematic. They were erased from view while remaining physically present, made invisible while still breathing, removed from collective memory while their bodies still occupied space. The mechanism was perfect, so perfect that 150 years later, you've never questioned why you've never seen them. But wait until you discover what governments built to make millions of human beings disappear without a single shot fired. Let's start with what you can't find in any museum gallery. Walk into any major museum with a 19th century military collection. The Hermitage in St. Petersburg, the Metropolitan in New York, the Musée de l'Armée in Paris. Find the War Gallery. You'll see hundreds of paintings dedicated to the Crimean Campaign, the American Civil War, the Franco-Prussian conflict. Battle scenes dominate every wall, heroic charges, soldiers falling in glorious combat, generals surveying battlefields, victory parades through city streets, award ceremonies with medals gleaming on dress uniforms. Now count the amputees in these paintings. 0. Not one legless veteran on crutches. Not one empty sleeve pinned to a chest. Not one soldier with a prosthetic limb visible in any victory celebration. We're told artists painted reality. That these canvases documented history. That 19th century painters captured the truth of their era. Really? Let's turn on the calculator and just count what they didn't paint. The Crimean War lasted from 1853 to 1856, 3 years of brutal combat. The siege of Sevastopol alone produced over 100,000 Russian casualties. Wounded, not those who perished. The most interesting part is just beginning. Write in the comments what city you're from, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe. The tension is rising. Who's watching us from where? Drop a like and subscribe to the channel. There's more to come. Mark yourselves in the comments. Which country are you from? Hit that like button and subscribe. The plot thickens. Let's check our geography. Right where you are right now, smash that thumbs up and subscribe. We're just warming up. Tell us, where are you watching from? Support the video with a like and hit that subscribe button. The climax is near. Share what corner of the world you're in right now. Drop a like and make sure to subscribe. Things are developing rapidly. Write your city in the chat. Slam that like and hit subscribe so you don't get lost. All the juiciest stuff is ahead. Let's get acquainted. Who's from where? Hit like and subscribe right now. The intrigue is building. right where you're watching this episode from, and reward us with a like and subscription. Emotions are off the charts. Quickly write what city you're from, drop a fat like, and subscribe to the channel. Medical practice of that era knew exactly one solution for shattered limbs: amputation. Any serious bone fracture, any deep tissue wound, any sign of gangrene meant the limb came off. Surgeons had no antibiotics, no advanced techniques, no options. Conservative estimate, 30% of wounded soldiers became amputees. That's 30,000 men from a single battle who returned home without arms or legs. 30,000. The population of a small city, an entire division of maimed veterans flooding back into Russian society. Now count the paintings of Crimean War amputees in all Russian museums combined. The number, 0. Coincidence? Artists painted dying soldiers, suffering soldiers, wounded soldiers being carried from battlefields. They showed agony. They showed sacrifice. They showed the moment of injury, but not one painting shows what happened 3 months later when those same soldiers tried to navigate life without limbs. What changed between the battlefield and the canvas? It's like filming a car crash in slow motion, but editing out every frame showing the injuries. You see the impact, you see the drama, but never the consequences. Either those 30,000 amputees didn't exist, which contradicts medical records that still survive in archives, or someone decided they shouldn't be seen. There's no third option, but paintings are subjective, right? Artists choose their subjects. They select what glorifies, what inspires, what sells to wealthy patrons and government ministries. Fair enough. What about photography? The objective eye of the camera that captures reality without embellishment or artistic interpretation, that's where the censorship becomes impossible to deny. Shift your gaze from paintings to photographs, because here the excuse of artistic choice collapses completely. 1861. The American Civil War begins. For the first time in history, photographers follow armies into the field with systematic intent. Matthew Brady organizes a team of over 300 photographers. Their mission? Document everything, and they do. Brady's team produces more than 7,000 photographs over 4 years. Battles, camps, generals, supply lines, field hospitals overflowing with wounded men, surgical tables, rows of soldiers recovering from amputations. These photographs exist today, right now. You can find them in the Library of Congress archives, verified, cataloged, preserved. Here's the question nobody asks. How many of these images were published in American newspapers during the war? Almost none. We're told the press was free, that newspapers competed fiercely for readers, that editors printed whatever sold papers. Do you seriously believe they ignored 7,000 photographs documenting the most dramatic event in American history? Let's follow the chain of decisions. Brady photographs a field hospital in 1862. Dozens of men with fresh amputations, bandaged stumps, hollow eyes, undeniable reality captured on glass plate. He brings it to newspaper editors in New York. The editors decline. Unsuitable for readers. Too disturbing. Not appropriate content. The same editors who published detailed written accounts of battlefield carnage. The same editors who printed casualty lists running to thousands of names. The same editors who described surgical procedures in clinical detail in their war correspondence columns. They drew the line at photographs of survivors, not the perishing, the surviving. It's like a newspaper covering a mining disaster that prints everything: the explosion, the rescue attempts, the memorial service, but refuses to photograph the miners who escaped with missing limbs. The disaster is newsworthy. The consequences are not. Who benefits from that editorial decision? The military departments that controlled photographer access to battlefields, the government ministries that framed war as noble sacrifice, the recruitment offices that needed the next generation of soldiers to see glory, not consequences. 3 separate institutions, 3 separate motivations, one identical outcome. Either the photographic censorship of maimed veterans was an extraordinary coincidence across hundreds of independent editorial decisions, or it was coordinated policy. There is no third option. This is not artistic preference. This is not editorial sensitivity. This is systematic suppression of visual evidence that war produces broken human bodies. The photographs existed. The veterans existed. The censorship was the only thing working perfectly. But visual erasure was just the beginning of the mechanism, because you can't hide 1.5 million physical bodies with editorial decisions alone. They had to go somewhere, and what was built to receive them will make your blood run cold. Let's return to the numbers. Because we've been talking about paintings and photographs, subjective choices, editorial decisions, artistic preferences, fine. Let's talk about bodies instead. Turn on the calculator and just count. Crimean War, 1853 to 1856, Russian side alone. 300,000 wounded soldiers returned home. Apply the 30% amputation rate we established. That's 90,000 Russian amputees from a single conflict. The population of a mid-sized European city. Imagine the entire city of Heidelberg consisting exclusively of men without arms or legs. That's Russia alone. One side, one war. Now add the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865. Medical records, surviving, verifiable, housed in the National Archives in Washington, document over 1 million surgical amputations performed across both sides. 1 million. That number is larger than the entire population of Paris in 1850. Are we still calling this a rounding error? Franco-Prussian War, 1870 to 1871. Combined casualties, roughly 250,000 wounded. At 25% amputation rate, 62,000 more amputees added to Europe's streets within a single year. The Wars of Italian Unification, 1848 to 1866. Multiple campaigns across 18 years. Conservative estimate, 40,000 maimed survivors. British colonial campaigns, Afghanistan, Sudan, the Zulu Wars, running continuously from the 1840s through the 1890s. Tens of thousands more. Add it all together. By 1900, Europe and America produced a documented, verifiable minimum of 1.5 million war amputees across 50 years of conflict. That's not counting blindness, not counting disfigurement, not counting the men whose injuries left them unable to work but visibly whole. 1.5 million, the combined population of Vienna and Budapest, an entire invisible nation. I know what you're thinking right now. Surely these men appear somewhere. In census records, in city directories, in church registries, in poorhouse logs. Some do. Scattered, fragmentary, statistically invisible against the scale we're describing. It's like searching for 1.5 million people and finding records of perhaps 50,000. The rest? Statistically erased. Either 1.5 million maimed veterans somehow lived out their lives without leaving meaningful historical traces, no memoirs, no photographs, no civic records, no visible presence in any city of that era, or they were systematically removed from public life. There is no third option. This is not a gap in the historical record. Gaps are accidental. This is a void with precise edges, consistent across every nation that fought major wars in the 19th century. Remember that number, 1.5 million. We'll return to it when the full picture assembles itself, and what you'll see will rewrite everything you thought you understood about how governments treat the men they send to war. Because first, we need to talk about where they built the hiding places. Here's where the investigation takes a turn that changes everything. Because hiding people from paintings is one thing, suppressing photographs is one thing. But 1.5 million physical human beings require a physical solution. And governments across Europe and America built exactly that, simultaneously, identically. Look at what opened between 1865 and 1885, France. Dozens of new institutions for disabled veterans housed in former monasteries emptied during secularization. Germany, converted barracks on the outskirts of major cities. Britain, repurposed workhouses, buildings already architecturally designed for keeping people contained and out of public view. America, the National Home for Disabled Volunteer Soldiers, established 1865, expanding to 11 branches across the country within 20 years. We're told these were acts of national gratitude. Homes for heroes, state care for those who sacrificed. Sounds honorable until you look at where they built them. Not in city centers beside the victory monuments, not in prominent locations where citizens could visit and honor veterans, not near the grand boulevards where victory parades marched. Every single institution, French, German, British, American, placed in remote locations, former monasteries chosen specifically for their isolation, barracks on city peripheries, rural properties hours from population centers. Ask yourself, where do you put something you're proud of? You put it where people can see it. You build monuments in plazas. You name streets after heroes. You place statues at crossroads. Where do you put something you're ashamed of? You put it where nobody goes. You give it a charitable name. You call it a home of mercy and locate it 3 hours from the nearest city. It's like a company that claims to honor its retired employees, but houses them in a facility with no visitors parking, no public transport connections, and operating hours that make visits nearly impossible. The honor is in the announcement. The reality is in the architecture. If these institutions were genuinely built for veterans' dignity, they would be centrally located, publicly accessible, prominently featured in civic life. Either governments genuinely honored their disabled veterans and chose remote locations by extraordinary coincidence across every nation simultaneously, or the remote location was the point. The answer is obvious. This is not evidence of poor urban planning. This is a coordinated system of removal dressed in the language of charity, operating across national borders with identical logic. We'll return to this pattern when the full international picture assembles. But first, what actually happened inside those remote buildings. The inspection reports that survived tell a story that no government of that era wanted published. And here we approach the part that the official histories of charitable institutions never mention, because inspection reports exist. Bureaucrats wrote them, administrators filed them. Some survived in regional archives across France, Germany, and Britain, and what they describe is not a home for heroes. Take one specific document, a French government inspection report from 1875 covering an asylum near Lyon housing disabled veterans of the Franco-Prussian War. Official capacity 600 residents. Actual population at time of inspection 847. Read that again. 40% over capacity in an institution for men who couldn't dress themselves, couldn't walk unassisted, needed constant physical care. Now let's count the staff. Total medical personnel, 12 doctors, total support staff, 31 attendants. That's 43 people responsible for 847 severely disabled men. One staff member per every 20 residents, for men who required help with every basic function of daily life. We're told these were homes of mercy, shelters for maimed warriors. The language of the era dripped with gratitude and honor. Do you seriously believe 43 people could provide meaningful care for 847 severely disabled veterans? Here's where the mathematics become genuinely disturbing. Government funding allocated per resident per day, 50 centimes, documented in budget records. Actual expenditure on food per resident per day, 15 centimes. A single loaf of bread in Lyon in 1875 cost 25 centimes. They fed veterans on less than the price of a loaf of bread per day, while receiving government funding calculated at more than 3 times that amount. 847 residents, 35 centimes difference between allocated and spent. Daily profit, 296 francs. Annual, over 108,000 francs. Vanishing from a single asylum. Every year, where did it go? The inspection report notes this discrepancy, then notes it was referred for further review. No further review appears in subsequent records. It's like a care home that charges families full rate, pockets 2/3 of the payment, and feeds residents on scraps while filing quarterly reports that nobody reads and nobody acts upon. Either the French government genuinely didn't know its veterans were being systematically starved while administrators pocketed the difference, or it knew and chose silence. There is no third option. This was one asylum, one inspection, one surviving document. There were hundreds of asylums across France alone, across Germany, across Britain, across America. But the scariest part isn't even this, because what those 847 men were doing inside those overcrowded walls, that's the revelation that makes this entire system suddenly make brutal, cynical sense. Those 847 men in Lyon weren't just warehoused, they were working. Open the German Imperial Regulations for Military Invalid Asylums, published 1882, Section 14, word for word. Quote 5, not quote 6, not quote 7 shall contribute. This is official government policy. Printed, distributed, implemented across every institution in the German system, and mirrored ways with different wording, identical meaning in French, British, and American regulations of the same decade. We're told this was rehabilitation, dignity through purposeful activity, meaningful occupation for men who might otherwise despair. Rehabilitation, seriously? Let's count what rehabilitation actually looked like. One-armed men, sorting, packaging, simple assembly work, legless men, seated at looms, sewing machines, textile operations, blind men, rope making, tactile sorting, packaging by touch, men with one functioning hand, bookbinding, envelope folding, label production, every remaining capability, systematically cataloged, systematically extracted. Now let's calculate what this extraction was worth. Average asylum, 500 residents, documented 70% capable of some form of labor, 350 working men, standard workday per regulations, 8 hours. That's 2,800 labor hours daily from a single institution, market wage for unskilled labor in 1880s Europe, approximately 2 francs per day. 350 workers times 2 francs equals 700 francs daily in labor value, extracted for free. Annual value of unpaid labor from one asylum, over 255,000 francs. That number is larger than the entire annual salary of 40 senior government officials. From one building, producing goods sold to outside contractors while veterans received starvation rations in return. Who received the profit? Asylum administrators, outside contractors purchasing the products, officials who awarded the supply contracts, who received nothing, the men doing the work. It's like a corporation that recruits employees with promises of care and housing, then works them 12-hour days without wages, sells everything they produce, and calls the arrangement therapeutic community living. We'd call that slavery. The 19th century called it charity. I know what you're thinking. At least they had shelter. At least they weren't on the streets. That's exactly what the system counted on. The alternative, begging on city streets visible to the public, was deliberately made worse. So men chose the asylum, and once inside, leaving was nearly impossible without money, connections, or family willing to receive them. Either this was an accidental convergence of exploitative practices across 4 separate nations, or it was a functioning economic system built on the captive labor of men who had no other options. This means only one thing, but the most profitable invalid wasn't the working one. We'll get to that calculation next, and it will make everything else feel mild. Let's calculate the most uncomfortable number in this entire investigation. Average life expectancy in 1880s Europe, 40 to 45 years. These were men in their 20s and 30s when they entered asylums, hardy survivors who had endured battlefield conditions, field surgery, wound infections that claimed most around them. These were not fragile men. Now look at documented mortality rates inside the asylums. British poor law records covering institutions that absorbed disabled veterans alongside civilian poor show average survival after admission, 3 to 7 years. French asylum administrative records from the 1870s and 1880s show similar figures. American National Home for Disabled Volunteer Soldiers' annual reports, publicly filed and still accessible, document mortality rates running at double the expected rate for men of equivalent age in general population. Double. Let's make this concrete. Our 90,000 Russian Crimean War amputees from Part 4. Survival rate through the first year post-amputation, approximately 70%. That leaves 63,000 men alive entering the 1860s, most in their late 20s and 30s. By normal mortality expectations for that age group, roughly 35% should have perished by 1880. That's approximately 22,000 men. Tragic but statistically expected. Actual estimated survivors by 1880 under 9,000. That means roughly 54,000 men from one country, one war, perished at more than double the expected rate within 20 years of returning home. Where is the outrage? Where are the investigations? Where are the parliamentary inquiries? Silence. Complete silence. We're told these men were weakened by their injuries, susceptible to illness, difficult to treat. Sounds reasonable until you ask one question. Who designed the conditions that weakened them further? Starvation rations documented in inspection reports. Overcrowding that accelerated disease transmission. No rehabilitation, no path to independent life, no reason to survive. These weren't natural conditions. They were constructed conditions. It's like a company that insures workers, then systematically removes all safety equipment, then collects on the policies when workers perish in accidents. Technically, nobody did anything. The outcome was engineered. Each man who perished in an asylum represented an immediate budget saving. No more pension obligation, no more maintenance cost, no more uncomfortable reminder of what war actually produces. Either governments across 4 nations simultaneously failed to notice their veterans were perishing at double the expected rate, or the rate was the point. There is no third option. That chill you feel right now, that's recognizing that the system didn't malfunction. It performed exactly as the budget calculations required. But we haven't yet discussed who else profited. Beyond the asylums, beyond the administrators, an entire industry built specifically on the desperation of maimed men and the corruption that fed it. Now let's zoom out from the asylums and look at the industry that grew around them. Because where there are captive customers with desperate needs and government money flowing to meet those needs, there is always someone positioning themselves between the money and the need. 1860s, the prosthetics industry explodes across Europe and America. Dozens of manufacturers, hundreds of patents filed, trade exhibitions featuring the latest artificial limb technology, glossy catalogs sent to military departments promising to restore dignity to heroes of the nation. The language was noble. The mathematics were predatory. 2 categories of prosthetics dominated the market: functional, wooden pegs, metal hooks, basic mechanisms that allowed minimal daily activity. Production cost, 5 to 10 francs. Cosmetic, articulated fingers, realistic skin-toned coverings, anatomically sculpted limbs designed to be invisible under clothing. Production cost, 40 to 60 francs. Now let's count what governments actually paid. American government contracts for Civil War veteran prosthetics, documented in congressional records from 1866, $75 per functional limb. Production cost, under $8. French government contracts from the same period, 150 francs per prosthetic. Production cost, under 12 francs. The markup wasn't a business margin, it was systematic extraction. Let's calculate the full scale. 200,000 eligible veterans across Europe and America by 1875. Government contracts at 150 francs average. Total contract value 30 million francs. Actual production cost at 10 francs per unit, 2 million francs. Difference, 28 million francs. 28 million francs distributed between manufacturers and the officials who awarded the contracts without competitive bidding. From a single procurement cycle for a single category of equipment. Who inspected the quality? Officials connected to the manufacturers. Who verified delivery? The same administrators pocketing the difference in asylum food budgets. Who audited the contracts? Nobody with any incentive to find problems. It's like a government that contracts a connected company to build bridges, pays 10 times the market rate, accepts bridges that collapse within years, then contracts the same company to rebuild them. The system wasn't broken, it was feeding. We're told these contracts represented state commitment to veteran welfare, that prosthetics programs showed government honor toward those who sacrificed. Do you seriously believe that a system with 1,400% markup on basic equipment, awarded without competitive bidding to politically connected manufacturers, represented anything other than organized extraction from human suffering. Either the governments of France, Britain, Germany, and America simultaneously and independently developed identical corruption schemes around prosthetics procurement, or this was the expected function of the system. The answer is obvious, but here's what closes the loop we opened in Part 4, that 1.5 million figure. When you map it against the full financial architecture we've now uncovered, the picture that emerges is something no official history has ever